right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, welcome to Moneyline with Nancy. It's week starts. I hope you're at your place of work and your TV sets are on, definitely, or you're watching on your mobile phone. At the beginning of the program, I did talk about what I'll be looking at today, which is this bad debtors and over 5 trillion naira hanging on AMCON's neck. Bad loans, that's from the banks, non-performing loans from the banks. In fact, AMCON spent over close to 1 trillion naira rescuing Skybank. And we know what happened, at least during the Sanusi's days. The matters are still even in court as I speak. A lot of them are not resolved. And these monies that I'm talking about is not just ghost money. These monies have been taken, that's over 5 trillion naira, have been taken by politicians, ministers, heads of organizations. In fact, when there is Owambe, you see all these big men and big women, they are spraying money, but they've not paid the loans that they owe. And what is the implication of all this to the Nigerian economy? So that's what I'm looking at right now. Tope Fasua is joining me now. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics and Economic and Policy Analyst. Welcome to the show again, Tope. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Morning. Good morning. I did give a background at the beginning of the program about AMCON. I did tell our viewers that AMCON was created in 2010, I think precisely in July. We do know the tsunami that happened in 2009. I remember vividly the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, who is now the Emir of Kano, Emir Mohammed II, I think, going up, down, up and down to tell the National Assembly to create what we know as AMCON today. And I remember then, during our analysis, 2010, the shows I had then in 2010, you know, talking about it as a bad bank, you know, to take the toxic assets from the banks. Just give me a brief background of, you know, AMCON and these bad loans.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, the whole idea was, you know, to create a bad bank, and then which will have a lifespan of its own. I think it was 10 years or so, within which to resolve the loans, quote and unquote, you know, get the monies back, go after the assets of those who are owing, you know, get the collaterals realized, you know, like we say in banking and so on. And then close shop in 10 years and everybody goes home happy. But from beginning, I quite didn't appreciate or even support the idea of a bad bank, because going from the experience of what they call the Great Recession of that period, what we saw was an attempt by those who have the power to privatize the profits and socialize the losses. So one way or the other, if Central Bank was putting up the money, initial funding, you know, to be able to bail out these banks and, you know, to actually relieve them of those loans, it needs to be said that Central Bank money is still everybody's money, because Central Bank is owned by the entire peoples of Nigeria, as well. It's not a privately owned central bank like in some other jurisdictions. You know, but the point now is that 8-9 years on, where are we with this? You know, it doesn't seem like we have actually had a very significant recovery. And of course, I've always followed everything that Malam Kuru,
that's Ahmed Kuru.
Ahmed Kuru, what he says, you know, and many times, you know, even from his position as an MD of a government-owned bank, you know, he's constrained. But sometimes when you read between the lines, you see that how much distress he's under, you know, because they are unable to recover the money. And there are many shenanigans played by people who own. The first thing is to say that, number one, in this same country, it's so difficult for legitimate business people at the SME level to get loans for their businesses.
And the big men get the money and they don't pay
exactly.
back.
Then, so what's this thing with the banks and the moral hazard of giving, you know, so much money to so few people and then losing the money? So we have about 300 people owing all the 5 trillion or thereabouts, you know. And these are the people, they're the ones that get awards. When government is incorporating any commission to look into what, they are the ones
incorporate
that you
them.
find there also. And of late, we've seen a scenario where there's capture, a political capture, a capture of the political space. They are the ones winning, positions into government. There's a certain gentleman who's there in the Senate now. The last time AMCON published the list, he's owing 160 billion naira. So we basically funded the man to get into the Senate, and that's it. It's totally wrong. And of course, after the president brought out the list of his ministers, the MD of AMCON came out again to say that, look, he's seen even some of the guys that owe them in that list.
Now,
and that's quite distressing for the people of this country.
Okay, Tope, just hold on. We'll be taking the discussions, in sequence. You've raised a lot of issues, and let's take a look at the issue of AMCON itself. Now, 9 years on, since it was created in 2010, it's supposed to have a 10-year lifespan, which should expire next year. And it's not even up to 1 year again to supposedly the expiration of AMCON. Looking back 9 years on, was that a good decision to have created AMCON? Because I remember in 2010, we had that argument. A lot of people supported, a lot of people were against it. Now, 9 years on, with our lenses, would we say it was a good idea?
I don't think it was. I think those banks that were tottering at that point in time should have been allowed to fail. They should have been allowed to fail.
Like the ones that failed in 2005 and went.
Yes. Look, you see that the MD of AMCON is repeating something now, that he wished that we could have the 1995 Failed Bank Act to come back. I was in banking in 1995. I was there. I saw out a lot of those, in those days, the finance companies and so on, people used to have 120% deposit rates in a year and all of that. And of course, it was just steaming and laden. Guys were just, presenting a good front, taking people's money and walking away. And I think it's this lazy approach to life. Nobody wants to create something tangible in this country. Everybody wants to be like a banker, just go there and sit inside AC and make your billions and so on. But we need to get on the streets. But the point, I think the real issue now is that the politicians of the day are not serious with doing anything about this issue. As a matter of fact, more specifically, one expected President Buhari to be able to take a position on this issue, to be able to move against these people by saying that, look, it won't be under my watch that you come and cheat the people. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is the very opposite, where he, wittingly or unwittingly, I would say unwittingly, he just doesn't know.
That's what I wanted to ask right now.
He doesn't know what's going on.
Do you think that the federal government, because I said earlier that we'll be taking these issues one by one, so that our viewers would even understand the thought process behind this. A certain senator right now, like you mentioned, is in the Senate right now, and his company is owing over. In fact, when I saw the figure, I said, Nancy, look well. My mathematics didn't fail me.
160
billion naira.
160.
There are a lot of them. A lot of them,
heavily
really.
implicated in the subsidy scam as well.
Saga, yes.
I was with someone, on a certain forum, someone who was in the Agimokwede committee said by the time he threatened them and said he was going to spill the beans and reveal some things and all of that, they backed out. You see, the process, I ran for president as well. People blame us and say, you don't have money, you are running for president. But check how those who get there get their money. And a lot of these people get compensated. So if you can put up money, whether you stole the money or not, and then you put the money up and someone uses it to become president or become senator or become whatever, in this country we will hail you and say, this guy is smart. But you see, we are actually taking ourselves down into the doldrums as a people. Let me say this also. It is not only that. This issue actually concerns me very personally because right now I'm in court. I'm in court because I decided to, not take AMCON to court, but to compel AMCON to investigate a certain issue because in the last list they published, the cooperatives of Shell, Mobil, and Chevron, their cooperatives, staff cooperatives, are owing 40 billion naira, which they refuse to service. So in the last list that AMCON published, they only published people who refused to engage. They said these are the recalcitrant debtors who have refused to engage with us. The total amount on that list was about 906 billion naira. Of course, that's where we saw, this other gentleman in the Senate, Ifan Yuba, specifically, owing 160. These are. In fact, it's right there on the internet. Yes, people like Jimo Ibrahim owing about 60 billion as well, and by Courtney 60 billion as well. And then, but the one that pisses me is why would the cooperatives of Shell, Mobil, and Chevron be owing 40 billion to the people of Nigeria? For building, perhaps you went there, the cooperatives went and borrowed money to build different mansions and villas for themselves, for the staff. Number one, you're lucky if you have a job in Shell, Chevron, and Mobil. You're lucky as a Nigerian. It's great and gross injustice for you to then go and borrow money from the banks to build mansions or estates or whatever it is you're building and refuse to engage. And of course, what happens is that from time to time, the leadership of the cooperative will leave. Another set of people will come, and when they come, they say, well, we don't know about that loan. It is unfair to the people of Nigeria. So not only are we having scenarios where people who are supposed to be businessmen have gone into the banks to borrow money, and again, they also allege that the bankers maybe have compromised those loans by collecting part of the money, and for that reason, they are not going to pay. So it's not good enough for such a thing to happen. Again, the implication for the economies is number one.
No, we'll come to that.
Okay.
We'll come to, as I said,
okay.
Let's just, I want us to be taking it, bit by bit. These toxic assets that really facing AMCON now, and I do know that, I think 105 debtors were published last year.
Yes.
Last year, 2018. I think 100 debtors in 2016, or what have you.
And they are there on the internet, actually.
Yes, for anyone to see. This financial rascality that we're seeing right now, that is now becoming something, the financial rascals are beginning to go into the political, into the political environment, perhaps to amass more power and more, and more perhaps romance with those in government, so that they don't get challenge for all of that. You made a point earlier, and I'll still want us to take a look at it. I don't want us to gloss over it, in the sense that these are, in fact, Ahmed Kuru, who is the MD of AMCON, did say that a lot of these politicians, a lot of these ministers, big people, or the bigger guys of organizations, both men and women, are owing AMCON and close to over 5 trillion naira. How should the government attend to this? Because this is a very huge issue. I don't want us to just talk about it and just go over it. You mentioned earlier that perhaps President Buhari doesn't know. But I also do know that, was it sometime last year, was it earlier this year, that the vice president said that the federal government will not do business with those owing AMCON. But I'm also surprised that we're also seeing them, and they are the ones romancing with also the federal government. So is it just, I think
it's a national issue.
I don't want us to gloss over it.
This is the liquidity of the entire country being sucked away. The MD of AMCON said that we now stand a very big risk of not being able to recover any of this 5 trillion at all. And that's because that 5 trillion is not really growing. I'm not sure they're charging extra interest on it. Probably have frozen it to say, okay, look, this is a bad loan. There's no point accumulating interest on it and all of that. I've read a number of the shenanigans, the fake collateral that a lot of people have. The unrealizable
pricing of the asset,
overpricing of
properties,
the kind of,
which is also a major issue.
Look, it's a national issue. That the government will do itself a disservice and do the people of this country a disservice by not engaging with it and solving this issue. So, of course, the AMCON MD did not say who and who have just been nominated as ministers who actually in their books. Though we can try to find out. I didn't bother going deep into that. Even the simple article I wrote asking Buhari whether this was him and all of that went viral. And all I did was just look at 2 or 3 or 4 people and say, look, what's going on here? If we actually dig it, I don't know why Nigerians aren't even inquisitive anymore. Beyond making noise on social media, we want, some investigative ability. You dig into stuff. Bring out facts that can't be denied, and I think that's where we need to begin to go in this country. It's totally unfortunate. It's a national issue. It's cheating.
What if facts are brought out and at the end, no, perhaps let me just dwell a bit on what you've just said. What if facts were brought up, but nothing has been done about it.
Well,
we
again, the hands of the government.
Was it last year before the
Yes.
election? The video that went viral on a certain governor that was being bribed with dollars and all of that, and nothing was done.
Very correct.
Do you understand?
But
So there are a lot of scenarios like that. Or that you will say, you will see something Korokoro on video, they will say, no, it's doctored or it's photoshopped or something.
You're very correct, but you see, what we have to understand is that, government is a continuum. Life will continue. When all of these guys are gone, other people will come. Everybody is writing their own record. But there are examples
and antecedents that
No,
set.
it's not forever. It won't last forever. These things have been etched.
We have to take charge of our forever.
These things have been etched. These things have been etched in history. That look, Yar'Adua came, and it was around the time of the global economic meltdown, crisis, financial crisis, and a few Nigerian banks, Oceanic and Co, they had overtraded. These guys were permanently at the CBN window borrowing money to survive, right? Because they had overtraded. Simple. I mean, recently I read an interview by one of the then MDs, and she was saying all sorts of things. The point was, you overtraded. Look, in finance, it is valid. What they call moral hazard. That sometimes when you have so much money at your disposal, you throw corporate governance away through the window, and you begin to trip. And you begin to believe your own press that you have arrived. That was what happened then. But Yar'Adua gave Sanusi the authority, and he traveled out of the country. He even traveled out of the country, even with his wife. Of course, the elites of this country never forgave Yar'Adua for that, But he did the right thing to say, okay, listen, if this is the scenario, let us take up these guys. Let us ensure we get the assets from them. Let us ensure that we track them. They can't continue to rule over the roost when they've done this bad. Of course, people will say, why is it this bank? Why not that bank? The point is, the thing is there. Who and who could not survive? Which banks had serious liquidity challenges and was always at the CBN window trying to borrow money at that point in time? So they moved against them. Look, even anywhere in the world, that's how it ought to be. That's how it has to be. You cannot, the way we treat the people of this country, remember, I mean, the same country, last 2 weeks or so, United Nations came out with this, that we have, I think, 95 million Nigerians in what they call multidimensional poverty, meaning that the poverty of food, poverty of education, poverty of health, poverty, there are even some people, you may have a job and be able to feed, but if you can't afford health, see all these people we see in the news every time, begging people, please, I have kidney problem, please come and save me, Nigerians. You go to Lagos right now, as you're approaching the airport, you see people with tumors on the road. And look, every country has their own, they have people with tumors and cancers and kidney issues and so on. But you won't see people on the road like that, begging, because we ruined the health sector, and then the big men take themselves abroad. I mean, look at the educational system. We have our students in public university sleeping outside on bed-bug-infested mattresses, living like worse than animals. And of course, our big men take delight in showing off, telling us how their children are graduating. So I think they've actually, look, we've actually gone past that era that triggered the French Revolution, when Marie Antoinette would say that they said the people couldn't find bread. They said, why don't you give them cake? That's what these guys are saying to us. I mean, a certain governor in the north recently took on a new Lebanese bride, to show that he has arrived. And so you can see where the priorities are. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's his private business.
Well, we don't need that. I'm not sure we need that in the space. In the same Bauchi state, you probably will find 3 million children on the streets. Where is seriousness going to come from? We have to be serious about our issue. The world is watching this country and wondering if these people know what they're doing and whether we even need a country. God forbid that the way we're going will be stateless one day. By the time this thing reaches a nadir and everything blows up in our faces. So to a large extent, again, this is an injustice, a gross injustice on the people of this country. We're using taxpayers' money to fund those banks and keep them alive one way or another, even though there's this idea that all those banks are meant to be contributing a certain amount of money to defray some of it to them. But the bottom line is that, these guys are not engaging with the people of this country. They're not engaging with AMCON. A lot of them have told AMCON to go to hell. In fact, some of the smaller ones that you won't hear, someone is owing so much money, the bank is harassing him, when are you going to pay? The guy said, transfer the money to AMCON. because they believe that, AMCON is a sock away of all the bad debts, and once it goes in there, nothing is going to happen, And again, I've even seen scenarios where some of the so-called respected economists have said that government should begin to think of creating AMCON number 2, because, again, non-performing loans of the banks went as high as 11%. I think they said it reduced to 9% recently. Yes, 11% of their portfolio is bad. And they are saying, no, now this is getting unsustainable. Why don't we pack all of those loans again, create AMCON number 2, or extend the life of AMCON, pack the loans and give to them? I think that, it's just totally unfair. We're being unfair to ourselves and to our future as a people. I think that the government should really, really get involved and engaged with this issue. I think something drastic needs to be done. I think they should empower the AMCON people to be able to go after these people, publish all of their names, shame them, name them, let the Nigerian people know who and who has eaten them dead as we speak right now, if the government is serious. And I think that's the kind of legacy that President Buhari should try and get for himself.
Okay, now let's take a look at some of the challenges before AMCON. And some of those challenges include, that's in the debt recovery process. And now we did talk earlier about, the overpricing of some of these properties that they put as collaterals. AMCON also may just also have the challenge of liquidity. What is also striking is the judicial process too, because AMCON says it's a bit frustrated with the judicial process to liquidate properties of those that are owing it. The timely payment of commissions, then the big old issue of politics in all of this. Just like we said earlier, that a lot of these debtors, some of them are notable politicians who are using their positions to frustrate the debt recovery process. Can we really come out of all of this? How can AMCON navigate all of this? Overvaluation of properties traced to debtors, financial regulatory issues, liquidity issues, political issues.
I don't know. Look, I think that, I'm sorry.
These are some of the challenges.
What we're seeing with this bad debt scenario is, and in many compromises around it, is just, to me, a way of showing that we as a people did not quite evolve fully the way we should evolve. We're still in that stage of that hunter-gatherer stage where people go after the money, not caring what, it's like who is closest to the money, grab it and run, first get the money and all of that, So, because in several compromises, we're talking about useless collateral. Most of the loans with AMCON, the larger chunk is with oil and gas, okay? The second largest chunk is in real estate, and so on, and then it goes on like that. A few of them are commercial loans. And it is obvious, some of them are actually irrecoverable. There are some of them where the principals are dead, and the loans are not properly collateralized. We're also talking of issues of the compromise from the bankers as well. There were instances where they said, many of these loans, by the time the loans are being given out, 30% that is going back to the big man in the bank that authorizes the loan, meaning that you are very sure that these loans are not coming back in the first place. But again, it's still a very big travesty of justice. And then again, you now go to the courts. And of course, in the case I instituted and I said, and where I'm going with that is that we have to bring in even the parent companies of Shell, Chevron, and Mobil, right? Because I know that these companies, that's the truth, I know that these companies don't like those kind of scandals. But if their staff at any point in time have gone to the bank to borrow money for real estate at that level, and only 3 loans that we saw, 40 billion, that was published. There are probably others that are smaller that was not. And in fact, it's not only Chevron. If you look at the list that AMCON publishes, or even the list that the CBN compels the banks to publish, you see all sorts of cooperatives. That's one thing we haven't looked at. Even state government, federal government ministry cooperatives that have taken billions. And when you go around, you see all these big buildings and all these people driving the big cars and so on. Most of the wealth in this country is based on criminality. And this is where you find it. Again, the issue is, if any honest businessman wanted to get a honest loan in this country, you get the runaround. They don't want to give you. But then you now wonder how you will give several billions to someone who doesn't have integrity, is not going to pay the money back, So there are many ramifications to the issue. And then, so in the case that I also have begun to see naturally, just how frustrating it is to take cases to courts in Nigeria. It goes on forever. The kind of speed that would have been used to dispatch this loan. So perhaps one of the things we need to do, that the government needs to do, is to perhaps maybe set up a commission or tribunal or whatever it is. Something that can come in and, you know, in a very quick way, deal with this issue and let these people pay up. Now, the truth is that most of these monies have ended up outside the country. People borrow money from banks here. They say they want to use this money for whatever. The first thing they do, they start to buy properties around the world. I mean, it's just stupidity. Why would you not invest your money in your own country? Then you want to buy this. And, you know, the other day I made a comment on Facebook. I said, look, if we could remember or even countenance the amount of useless properties that we've bought in different places in the world. They say, oh, this one is here. And you think, you know that those guys are smart. They will show you, it looks very glistening, but they know that when you put your money in there, number one, you will not, even when you say you want to rent out the house, you can't rent it out, it's too big, nobody's buying that kind of, nobody, and you can't even get on the secondary market to sell.
No,
It actually, the real problem is the rape of this country, consistent rape of this country by these people who say they are big men, quote and unquote, that people in power who are now buying into government, a capture, a regulatory capture, a governmental and political capture of Nigeria. And that's where the real problem is.
Let's take a look at this idea of too big to fail. Because we saw during the financial crisis, isn't it, the issue of, oh, too big to fail, too big to fail. Are we seeing that gradual process of too big to fail in Nigeria, especially with what's happening around the banks? The government rescued Skybank. Now it's Polaris Bank, isn't it? We also saw the merger between Access and Diamond. Is it? I'm not saying both failed or Diamond failed, but they say it was a merger and all of that. What does it say for our banking sector moving forward? Is our banking sector? I also do know that Emefiele did say it in the second term agenda speech that this tenor that he's looking towards recapitalization.
Yes, you know, I wish the problem I had with that recapitalization was simply that usually the larger the capital, the larger the risk. Because when our banks were told to recapitalize, you know, by Soludo, that was what ended up in the Oceanic and the Intercontinental and all of that. And again, it brought that moral hazard. Before then, we used to have boutique banks. You know, IBTC was a boutique bank, as a merchant bank was doing well on its own. Nothing wrong with that. You know what? By 2012, we went back. That's what we're saying. But you do the big transaction and you lose the big money.
No, but can't you also be built in a way? Hold on, but can't you also be built in a way that corporate governance and your risk management framework is good? There are also big banks that are good, that are doing business the way it should be done.
So again,
can't we promote that?
Nancy, now, you know what? I mean, we did all of that in 2009, 2010.
Most of our banks are in Africa.
By 2012, we brought back merchant banking, FSDH merchant bank. Now we have FSDH merchant bank, we have Coronation, you have all of those. Now you want to now go back to the issue of capital. Though the governor had a point because he was talking about devaluation of the currency to say that we had 25 billion when we was 120 to the dollar, and now it's 305. You know, maybe you'll be thinking of tripling the whatever.
About
I don't know. But my problem is if you make it, I think that we need to have a good framework to say there's nothing wrong with regional banking. There's nothing wrong with, you know, merchant banking. Universal banking hasn't quite worked. We saw a scenario where they were not only doing banking, they were selling recharge cards, they were doing all sorts of things. So it was, you know, universal banking. They were moving into spaces where they shouldn't move. The terrain has changed now. We're even talking about fintechs now, okay, coming into play. You know, are you going to ask fintechs? Sometimes they may even see a scenario where those banks will carry so much capital and not know how to leverage that capital for profitability because the fintechs are eating into the space and all of that, you know. So that's the problem I have with that, you know. But besides that, I think the entire financial system is not doing too badly now. You know, I think that we need to put an eye on the issues of non-performing loans. We need to, of course, continue to, you know, bring corporate governance into the space. The issue of too big to fail is not a very palatable issue, but it's there in most
because
countries.
If it fails,
you see, in fact,
it's your money, is my money that
exactly,
will go.
You know what?
And NDIC would only insure us to a tune of highest you have is 500,000
but again,
even if you have 50 million.
But again, the alternative is that the bank does not fail, but you use taxpayers' money to bail it out, and then you let the guys walk away for free. When they bailed out Sky Bank, we did say it, and I think then, who was that? I think it was NDIC, and somebody did, Minister of Finance, Zainab, did say that, oh no, that these guys who killed the banks, they're not going to go scot-free, but we need to be sure that they're doing anything about it beyond the normal stress of come to court today, come to court tomorrow. The next thing is everybody forgets about the case, you know. So they are what they call systemically important banks, SIBs. Those ones are there. Maybe like, you know, I wouldn't advertise for them. Yeah, you know, they need to pay you for the advert. But there are those banks there. They still, in fact, that then means that those banks need to be actually checked the more. And what we want to see is personal responsibility beyond the corporate responsibility. Personal responsibility that you are the MD of a bank, the bank goes down, then, you know, you have to actually pay the time. You have to do the time for collapsing this bank because the responsibility is on you. Another fact, the very interesting thing, because I think one of the nominees of the president for minister was also was MD of Bank of the North, and then later, or maybe before then, Bank AIB, African International Bank, which are bad banks in those days. You know, and there was this argument about whether, you know, the banks went down under him or not, or whatever. But
we just have, any less than 5 minutes
any MD of a bank that goes down should actually do the time, and the government must be very clear in moving against those people. You shouldn't be left to conjecture.
Now, what are the implications to the economy in just a minute?
Well, the implication is clear. You know, number one is that, you know, you see, the thing with bad loans is that it's out of the system. If those loans were repaid, then bank can expand credit, you know, to people, and the economy can grow. When we're talking about 2.01% GDP growth, which is below population growth and far below inflation rate, we're in negative growth rate territory of 13%, if you ask me. 13%, which we need to dig ourselves out from. You know, so when you're talking about that kind of growth rate, it is clear that the country is not growing the way it should, and then that translates into poverty. If the banks were, if credit was taken serious in this country, we wouldn't be where we are today. If you went abroad, the economies are based on credit. When you see people who lose their homes and they're sleeping rough on the streets, it's because they messed up their credit. Everybody, not to talk of companies, you can't borrow money and just walk away in the UK or in the US. You can't
here, they borrow the money and...
You cannot do that as a businessman and
okay, let's take a few comments.
So we need to have a proper credit culture in Nigeria.
Let's take a few comments now. Daniel Musa Yarame on Twitter says, how do you expect a senator and minister to deliver if they are in a big mess of debt? Using public funds and DMB loans to fund campaigns is the height of desperation to win elections. While Hilary says the issue of bad loans in Nigeria needs a more proactive and robust credit risk management framework to really mitigate it. Customers' perception also needs to change, as this bank's national cake, in quote, are indeed depositors' funds. Charles says it is quite unfortunate that so many people just need little capital to kickstart businesses, but all efforts are to no avail to secure loans, while our politicians are lavishing and expending our hard-earned money, taxes in quotes, for inconsequential adventures. What a country, so deplorable. Which other comment? So many comments coming through. Madiba says the account and assets should be frozen and seized. It's a pity that we do not have a rule of law. What we have is nonsense. That's the much I can take. I'm seeing your comments. We should actually be, you know, perturbed with the rise of bad loans and the over 5 trillion naira debt hanging on AMCON. AMCON, perhaps even as we go forward, should say, should we add more muscles to them, or should they have, you know, their teeth, they should be strengthened, or their teeth should be a bit sharper too. But we'll continue to look at that.
And credit culture in Nigeria is the ultimate thing we need to deal with.
All right, that's the much you can take. Many thanks for joining us. Tope Fasua, the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics, has been speaking with me for the last 30 minutes or so on bad loans and AMCON debts. Let's see a list of the 2019 debtors. But one will say, all the list we've had since 2016 or so, what has happened to them? They are the same politicians.